Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Mouth of the Tyne. Another live show for you guys tonight. Tonight we are live with DOMINIC SCURR from the Shields Gazette and Mouth of the Tyne podcast. Dominic, thank you very much for joining us tonight, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me on. It's couldn't have picked a better time to be talking about Newcastle United at the moment. So yeah, timed it well. No football to come up, but yeah, great form from Newcastle.
Yeah, no, it is, man. Everything's going great at the minute, and like I say, I love doing these shows, just trying to get a different perspective from different fans and NUFC personalities, journalists like yourself. So it's great to have you on, my friend. So let's get straight into it. It's been a crazy few months. We've just surpassed the 1 year anniversary of the NUFC takeover. Obviously, it's been a really crazy year, but we stand currently in third position in the league, unbeaten in 10 games, 6 wins on the bounce, most clean sheets, top of that league with 7. Pope's got 7 clean sheets and the best defense in the league with conceded, I think it's 11 goals, if that's right. So things are looking rosy, mate. Things are really looking good for the team. I want to get your thoughts on kind of what's impressed you the most over the past few months. Now, there's been so much stuff that's gone on. It seems like every day there's a positive news story coming out of Newcastle United. But what's impressed you most, whether that be on the pitch, off the pitch? What's really stood out to you over the past few weeks with regards to our positive results?
Yeah, that's a hard one, actually, for all the right reasons, obviously. The defence, like you mentioned, to go from a side who in 2021 set a Premier League record over a calendar year for having the worst defence in the league. I think 80 goals they conceded over 42 games. You're talking nearly 2 goals a game they conceded. To go from that and in less than 12 months have the best defensive record in the Premier League, most clean sheets, like you say, that's some transformation. And obviously, almost the entire defence has changed in that time, bar Fabian Schär. But that's been very impressive. But you're looking at, I think the big one for me would be Newcastle are third, but they're not third by fluke. They're third on complete merit. They've played all the big teams with the exception of Arsenal, and they've outplayed Man City for 60 minutes. They've outplayed Liverpool for 45, outplayed Man U for 45, outplayed Spurs and Chelsea. So it's not just the fluking results against these teams. They are outplaying them and proving they are almost one of these teams, if you like. And I think that fear factor is back. You saw it against Chelsea on Saturday. Chelsea were standing off Newcastle. They were almost... it was almost like the reverse game... a reverse of the game, between the sides at St James's Park last season when Newcastle just scared of Chelsea, almost sat off them, let them play in front of them. Chelsea were doing that to Newcastle, and you don't do that unless you're playing against a very good team who you're scared of, basically, who think can cause you trouble. And the fact that you're watching Newcastle and you're not just going, how are we getting away with this? How are we winning all these games? You can see why they're winning the games. They're winning these games because they're better than the teams they're coming against. They're better than Spurs, better than Chelsea, based on what we've seen so far. Yeah. It's the big challenge now is how long can they keep that up? Can they maintain that consistency? But yeah, that's probably the most impressive thing I've seen. The way they've actually proven not just the top 3 side based on they've had a good run of form. The top 3 side on complete merit. They've outplayed. They've been better than these teams on the pitch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like you say there, it is about finding this consistency now. We were talking about it on a previous show. When does good form become the norm, basically? When do you stop going through a good patch of form and this is just us now? So I would like to think that this is just us now. But obviously you never know. We probably won't know until the season's ended. And, obviously kind of we get like a bigger picture of where we stand at the end of the season. But for me, I feel like this is more than just a purple patch. I feel like this probably is the new Newcastle United. So it's like, I mean, things are just going so well on the pitch. I can imagine off the pitch, I mean, yourself and your colleagues get access to the press room and, you get to see a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we don't see. What's kind of changed on that side of things, from a press perspective? I can imagine it was pretty dark days under under the previous regime, and also let's say the previous manager as well. But for years there was a dark cloud hanging over us with Ashley cutting corners everywhere. Just everything was just done on such a tight budget. Now it just seems like there's huge backroom teams of staff. I mean, I've noticed it with the pictures, what we're putting on, the photos. It's like it's not a skeleton crew anymore. It's a huge backroom team. And I can imagine you've seen changes in the press room. And obviously, I'm not, asking you to divulge loads of, secrets that you kind of wouldn't want to talk about. But is there anything that's kind of stood out just for you on a personal level and your colleagues? Like, what's changed behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I've only covered the club full time for the past year, but I have worked press conference previously and covered them. And I think the big one, the positivity is clear. I mean, Bruce's press conferences, they were entertaining. That's one thing you could say about them. He'd come out all guns blazing at times. Howe's press conferences, for all the right reasons, are a bit more tame, a bit more just positive, and we're talking about all the good things Newcastle are doing, and there's less sort of confrontation and animosity, really. And I think obviously a big thing that's helped as well, press conferences are now back in person. They're not over Zoom as they were for a large spell under Steve Bruce as well, which has obviously helped Eddie Howe sort of regain that connection or gain that connection with the local media and things like that. So I think that's been a big one. You've seen that positivity, the questions being asked, the answers. It's a lot more polite. It's a lot more. I think tame is probably the wrong word, but it's
amicable. There's a lot of respect there.
And the way Eddie Howe's press conferences are, you can almost. I'm using the wrong words here, but you can almost predict what they're going to be like because things are going so well. If you're going to ask a question, you're not going to get shot down in the way Steve Bruce may have shot you down and things like that. So it's just a nicer place to work, basically. Yeah, and
I guess that's it, isn't it? Everyone wants a nice environment to work in. Yeah,
exactly. And I think one well-respected national journalist I spoke to after Saturday's game, I won't name them, I'll keep their integrity intact, but they were saying, as a national journalist, you've got to maintain a certain level of disconnection and neutrality from the club. But now, speaking to Eddie Howe, covering all these wins, it's getting increasingly harder not to let that almost Newcastle fan inside you creep out at times. And obviously, we're all professional, all journalists first and foremost, but it is getting increasingly harder because it is just there's so much energy and momentum around the club at the moment, which is just great to see.
Yeah, no, things are going so well. It's just it really is spectacular. I mean, obviously, as a fan from the sidelines, we're just watching it unfold, and it must be really kind of just great for you. Obviously, I'm guessing you're a fan. Well, I want to touch on this kind of later on in the show, but are you a Newcastle fan yourself, or am I taking liberties there?
No, I'm a Newcastle fan,
Yeah. So that's what I mean. So it's great for you as a professional, but also on a personal level. This is the type of job that you've worked hard to get in, and now you're reaping the rewards at a club that's actually trying. We've got that ambition, and I know, obviously, like I say, if I work for my company and I wasn't enjoying myself, and I'd be thinking, what am I doing here? But obviously, it gives you such a boost to be going to work when you're covering a club with ambition now and hope, and something for the fans to kind of really latch onto, and the fans build the connection with the club. Yourselves build the connection with the club, and kind of like shows tonight, you're also building connections with the fans. So it's kind of like a mutual kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where everybody's in harmony, just getting on well. And it's great after years of turmoil that we can actually just do things like this, and people actually want to talk about Newcastle United. Like someone a few weeks back said, so what made you start these shows? And I'm like, well, it's who would have wanted to do this as a hobby in their free time, under the previous regime. There was nothing that anyone wanted to talk about. It was like every week we seem to get beat. But yeah, it's just like now things are on the up, and yeah, it's great. I'm so pleased that you guys are getting kind of good job satisfaction now. It really is great to hear. So moving on to another question. I don't know the answer to this one, and this one really is tricky because if you ask me, I'm not sure I would know. But is there anything that you would improve, just kind of from your observations with like kind of how we play on the pitch. Is there anything that you would tweak in the course of the next few months? Just as a kind of from a fan perspective, you're a football fan. Is there anything that you kind of maybe change, tweaks with the team, or kind of anything that stands out where we could maybe improve?
Yeah, that's a hard question, like you say. I mean, it's hard to say when you're 10 games unbeaten, like 6 wins in a row at all competitions. Yeah. Obviously, things behind the scenes can improve. Things like the club shop, ordering kits, the ticketing system, things like that. There are areas the club will continually look to improve behind the scenes. On the pitch, it's hard to pick a fault, I'll be honest. I think one thing you could do is look back at the winless run that we're on before the current run of wins, where they were without Bruno, Callum Wilson, and it's finding a way to adapt to that maybe a bit better. They are very reliant on Bruno, on Kieran Trippier in particular. He could quite easily have a spell out the team. It's just adapting to that and finding a way. They've shown they can play without a big player like Alan St-Maximin over an extended period of time and still pose a threat. So why can't they do it with Bruno, with Trippier, for example? Because there are going to be spells where they can't play every game, and Newcastle will need a result. So it's learning how to adapt, and there's no reason why they can't do that. And then another thing, this is probably a personal gripe of mine, really. I think Newcastle are a bit of I'm nitpicking here, are a little bit of an imbalanced side where they are so much of a threat down that right-hand side with Kieran Trippier and Miguel Almiron at the moment. There is maybe an imbalance. Arguably, you could say it's a deliberate one with Dan Burn and Jacob Murphy or whoever it is on that left side. And I think if you can manage, whether it be by bringing players in or just tweaking things slightly, if you could manage to be a equal threat on both sides, that's certainly something that would make Newcastle, like, unstoppable is probably too strong, but it could make a big difference. But like I say, I think maybe Eddie Howe is intentionally sort of lopsiding Newcastle with that so much threat, and then it's more conservative on the left-hand side. So
no, I totally understand. It's been interesting how Targett started the season at left back, but then quickly was usurped by Burn. And I still don't know whether this was kind of, obviously I've never spoke to Eddie, but I'd like to know the reason what initially kind of made him think, right, this is the way we're going to go forward. Because Targett didn't appear to have done anything drastically wrong. And I can't remember if it was maybe injury kind of forced it upon him at first, and then it kind of just worked. And like you say, with Burn playing as a kind of, it's weird because sometimes he does play as an orthodox left back. He does get forward. He really does kind of stretch the play. And he's not as quick as, some other players would be in that position. But it still kind of works when he does get forward. But like you say, there's a lot of the time when it is a kind of back three and, it's kind of Trippier has the free role. But we were talking about this on another show the other night. We were saying exactly what you said there. To be honest, that will be one of our biggest kind of changes, what we personally would make to the team, bringing attacking left back in. And it's a hard one because obviously Burns been playing so well, but then would you move him centrally? But then Botman's in that position. And these are ultimately questions that aren't really for us. This is like for Eddie to worry about. We just want to, as fans, want to kind of build this squad up so we've kind of got cover in certain areas. But I think in the next few months, my personal opinion, you could maybe see a left back coming in, someone like Grimaldo or Sosa, someone from the continent that's a kind of really young, but like kind of at a level where they could probably drop straight in and be a great attacking outlet down the left. And likewise as well, it's been hard to rely on ASM this season, who has kind of reverted back to his injury-prone ways of a couple of seasons ago when he missed big chunks of the season, especially during the COVID season and times like that. So if we could maybe bring in another left back and a left winger, I think that would really kind of open things up. But as you say, it begs the question, is it all intentional at the minute? Are we quite happy to, continuously attack down the right-hand side? And something else I noticed with the kind of the quadrant of players down the right with Almiron, Trippier, to say Bruno and Longstaff, them four working so well as a quartet. And I put a tweet out earlier today that it's kind of very predictable in a way. Kind of Bruno's balls over the top to Almiron, Longstaff making the charge and runs down the right, being found by Trippier and Bruno. And the fans can see it coming. And you're thinking, can the opposition see it coming? But even if they can, they don't appear to be able to stop it, which kind of what I said in the tweet was, if it's predictable, okay. But, if it's predictable and the high quality is there, then it doesn't really matter. If you understand what I'm saying, there is a kind of predictability to our play, but we're playing with that much high quality when we do these moves and these attacks down the right, that it doesn't seem to, the opposition can't seem to stop it. So you've noticed too?
Yeah, there's an inevitability to Newcastle when they attack. You do expect that Bruno clip ball. And what I would say to that, there is a predictability. I'd say Miguel Almiron's probably the maverick, if you like, in there, where there is a little bit of unpredictability regarding him. Is he going to cut inside? Is he going to go down the line? And that is what teams have struggled to deal with, and that's why he's been so successful. You look at his goals; they've come from a mixture of cutting inside. Even the goal on Saturday came from Miguel Almiron cutting inside. Or is he going to go the other way, like he did against Spurs, like he did against Fulham? So that's probably what is making the difference: the predictability to it and the quality. But then Miguel Almiron, the sort of what's he going to do? You'd almost prefer him as a defender to cut inside, because it's going to take a very good shot or a very good pass to get a goal, because in behind with his pace and his finishing at the moment, he's such a real threat.
Yeah. Let's talk about Miggy just for a second, just because we've kind of brought him up already, and it was someone I wanted to talk about on the course of the show. He's doing well, so well, and we were talking about it the other night, saying this is great, but he has to kind of keep his form up, because we are going to bring a lot of attacking talent into this team over the course of the next few months and years. And I would love nothing more than Miggy to keep this form up and, kind of just remain in this side. He's such a likable character, and he is such a great player. But I just worry that he will revert back to the Miggy of old. I would like to think that he hasn't, because Eddie improves players, and it's not a short-term fix. When Howe seems to improve a player, they stay improved. If you understand what I mean, it's happened with Joe Linton, it's happened with Cher, it's happened with Longstaff as well, I guess you can say, Willock to an extent. All these players that were kind of, just kind of going nowhere under Bruce. Howe's given them a new lease of life, and a year later, the form has hit a level, and it's maintained at that level week in, week out. So I guess I was just kind of toying with the idea that, slight worry that Miggy could, maintain these levels, but I think that he can. Do you think that he can?
I don't think he can maintain the sort of one goal in less than every. Yeah, I don't think he can maintain that. The performances, there's no reason why he can't. I think, like we were saying, just the way Newcastle are playing, the consistent quality they can create with that quartet, as you put it, is just plays to Almiron's strengths. We've never doubted his energy and his work rate. It's just been his end product, and that will be what he's ultimately judged on as an attacking player. It's happened the past month or so, or this season in general, if you include pre-season as well. So that's been good to see. I would question whether he can maintain it, but if he can even if he finishes on 12, pushes the sort of 15 goal mark, that's a brilliant season for him. That's remarkable. So, and he's already more than halfway to that after 15 games. So, I think one thing he could probably add is more assists to his game. We saw that on Saturday. That's his first assist of the season.
Yeah,
first assist in a while. So, if you can add that as well, people will probably be less sort of scrutinise his goal record as much. So they'll be less dependent on him to pop up with the goals as he has in the past month or so.
Yeah, and it's great considering that Bruce was playing him as a defensive midfielder during his kind of latter months here. So he's done well. He's done well. Anybody that can come back from, a defensive midfield position under Bruce to scoring 6 games in a row or whatever it was, deserves credit for that. He's such a good player and a really nice guy as well. So obviously maintaining your kind of professional stance as well, but I just want to get your personal views on January targets. I'm not asking you for anybody that you've kind of heard that we are going to sign, but just anybody that you would like to sign, as a fan. Do you think, have you got your eye on somebody like specific? I know I really like Maddison. He's a bit, it's a bit cliche. Obviously, he's kind of the name on everybody's lips at the minute, but I do really like him, and I do really think he could fit into this team. Have you got your eye on anybody that you'd love us to sign in January?
Well, you should say Maddison being a cliche, because that's literally the first name that came to my head. I was like, could say Maddison, but it is a cliche. I think he's one, considering how the club did go after him in the summer, put 2 bids in, weren't able to get him, and the way he's actually kicked on since then. I think 7 goals, 4 assists in 13 games. Even Leicester, when they were struggling, he was the standout player. And you're looking at a world where you pay £100 million for Jack Grealish. I'd say Maddison is a better option, in my opinion. And if you could get him for around £50 million, around that would be good business for Newcastle. So he'd be one. There's no denying that. There's a reason why he's the cliched answer, if you like. But I think overall, you just want to see in January Newcastle strengthening the squad, whether it be 2 or 3 quality additions. Not expecting massive money to be spent, but you see all these opposition managers are talking on Newcastle don't have the European challenge, they don't have the midweek games. That's their advantage, and Newcastle, it is an advantage to them. I mean, Graham Potter saying it after Newcastle played 3 games in a week didn't make much sense, but it is an advantage to them, and if they can have a squad almost pre-ready for European football, if you like, hopefully a season before it happens, then that's going to help them in the league, and it's going to help those players bed in for next season as well. So if we can add 2 or 3 quality additions just to strengthen the squad, not necessarily guaranteed starters, although that would be ideal, but if you can just looking at the squad, because you look at Newcastle, there's no criticism to these players, but when you're starting people like Jacob Murphy, left wing, these are players who, good squad players, but just doesn't quite sit right with a team who are sitting 3rd in the Premier League. Or Chris Wood on Saturday, he was only fully fit striker. So there are improvements to be made in that department. And I feel harsh saying that, because Chris Wood in particular is a £25 million signing earlier this year. So I just think improvements can be made and the squad can be strengthened as a whole. Sort of, because the first 11 is so strong, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, is very, very strong. It's just when you get those injuries, who can come in.
So something we were talking about on a previous show as well was saying, we've often been winning in games, so we've never had to bring kind of game changers on, especially in the kind of latter stages. We have brought, Murphy on and Wood at various stages, but it's more been to just kind of maintain energy levels rather than try to, provide an assist or score a goal. But there will be times, over the course of the next few months and years when we kind of do fall behind, when we are figured out a bit and teams work out how to break our defence down. I would think there is anyway. The way the defence is playing, you wouldn't like to put money on it at the minute, but I'm sure the day will come when we do concede a goal again. But I just feel like the options from the bench, and obviously, like you've just touched on there, we're going to need to improve the squad as a whole. And if we're searching for a goal off the bench, I mean, to be fair, Isak's been injured. He'd probably be on the bench, and he would have been somebody that could have been coming in the latter stages of games to kind of, as a replacement for Wilson in some games, maybe a bit more legs about him than Wood. But it's a shame he's been injured. But in general, I feel like we do need to kind of look at building a squad. And I think, they've been great servants to the club. But in particular, the 2 players that I'd probably like to see omitted over the next 6 to kind of maybe 12 months, probably in the next 6 months, if I'm being truthful, is Dummett and Ritchie. I mean, they've been included in the squad this season, and the contribution is basically zero. Dummett is a great guy. I know a few people that actually know him. He's a great lad by all accounts, a real leader in the dressing room, but his fitness-wise just isn't quite there anymore. And it's not just a kind of injury that's, kind of comes around every now and again. It pretty much is I don't want to say chronic because that sounds really bad, but to me that's kind of maybe how it's going. If you can't stay fit enough to like even maintain a place on the bench, then you're never going to get yourself back in the starting 11. And with Richie as well, a great servant for this club. He's been so good over the years, and his legs kind of went maybe earlier than we'd anticipated or kind of hoped that they would. But he's another great leader of this dressing room, and it'll be a sad day when both kind of leave the club, or maybe hopefully go into coaching roles with the club. But for me, they'd be the two players that I'd probably omit in January, and maybe bring some more quality in there, like a maybe defensive midfielder, and just maybe use the squad places in a different way, not necessarily replacing like for like. I don't think we need another left-sided centre back like Dummett, or left back maybe we could, but Richie as well. They're just not having enough impact on the squad at the minute. So there would be my personal choices to replace, and maybe I could really see a nice, like a defensive midfielder, someone like Alvarez. I know he got talked about a lot, and he was heavily linked with Chelsea. Just somebody kind of sit in there and break up play and free Bruno up. Would you like to see Bruno freed up further up the pitch? Is that something that you could see working for us long term?
Yeah, I think we've spoke to him himself and asked his preferred position. He says that number 8 position is where he'd rather play, and that was at a time when he was playing the deeper role, and it wasn't quite working. I think it was after the Bournemouth game, which was a frustrating game for Newcastle. Since then, though, I think Sean Longstaff and Joe Willock have really kicked on, and the balance has been right. But yeah. I think if you're thinking long term, in an ideal world, you'd have a strong defensive midfielder, sort of like you say, a more natural one, and then you'd have Bruno as your number 8, and then Joe Linton, Joe Willock, Sean Longstaff, whoever alongside him, and that would certainly add to what Newcastle are offering on the whole as well. And then talking about the 25-man squad, I think you're right. I think Sean Longstaff and Matt Ritchie, Sean Longstaff, Paul Dummett, sorry, get my Geordie lads mixed up. I know, yeah.
That's harsh.
I know. I was getting my Geordie lads mixed up. Paul Dummett and Matt Ritchie, two great servants to the club. They'll be remembered, but you're looking, these are players who've in the past 12 months barely played any football, injury problems at the moment. I think they're both nursing calf injuries. So it's just one of them. There's no room for sentimentality anymore in terms of the squad. Newcastle are chasing, we're literally talking here, 15 games, Newcastle are chasing Champions League football this season. They're as great guys and great servants as there are. A 33-year-old Matt Ritchie and a 30-odd-year-old Paul Dummett have no room in a squad chasing Champions League football. That's just the reality of the situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And as you touched on there, things have snowballed rather quickly. I don't think any of us, as press or fans, were kind of anticipating the speed at which we kind of would get to this stage. I honestly thought after the window that I felt in the summer, that we maybe lacked a couple of signings. I was a little bit disheartened we didn't get Pedro in. I felt we could have, done something with him, especially as an option from the bench. I like his energy and I like his kind of goal scoring ability. And I think he'd fit in well with Joe Linton and Bruno too. So I was disappointed we kind of didn't get him in, and maybe a couple of others here or there. I do feel like there was maybe room for 2 or 3 more in the summer. Maybe that would have been too much of an overhaul. But the point I'm trying to make is I was quite worried a few weeks ago on the show. We were talking, me and the guys, and I was saying, I think we might need to reassess as to what our kind of ambitions are this season or what we're capable of. And this was kind of on the back of maybe the 4 or 5 draws we had when we were kind of struggling to win. I think was Bruno out at the time. We were still kind of finding our feet this season, and I was so worried that I thought, it's going to be tough to get top 10 here, let alone maybe break into the top 7. But I was proved wrong, and I'm so glad that I was. It just feels like everything's kind of clicked into position. It's a great time for the club. But what I wanted to ask you, and this is a great question, you're going to love this one. Are we in a title race, Dom? Do you want to go on record?
Yeah. I'll go on the record. I don't think we are yet. Given how good the start has been, still 7 points off Arsenal, and Arsenal have played 1 game fewer. Man City and Arsenal, that's the title race for me. If in 15 games' time, Newcastle are still with 8 games to go in the season, 7 points off the top, then maybe I'd say, yeah, you've got an outside chance of being in the title race. But if we're being realistic, Newcastle would literally have to maintain this form they've been on over the past month or so for the remainder of the season to even stand a chance, really. You're looking 90 points plus wins the title in most seasons, particularly recently when Man City and Liverpool have been pushing almost the 100-point mark, really. The margin for error is just so small. And I think with Newcastle's squad, like we've touched on, paper thin is too strong, but it's nowhere near as deep as the likes of Man City and Liverpool, for example. Arsenal, a little bit in between. But to compete with those teams over 38 games is a huge, huge challenge. And I think if Newcastle can get top 4, you have to recognise that as a massive, massive achievement. That's almost the best case scenario, if you like, without literally being the best case scenario and winning the league. But it's just amazing after 15 games, Ben, you can even get away with asking me that question.
It is I take so much joy from just being able to ask that question in a serious manner and not get laughed out the room. I love it, man. But yeah, it would be difficult to win the title. But I think something, you touched on it there, what is more likely and more achievable is if you look at our form since Howe came in, but let's say since the start of 2022, this form is top 4 form, top 5 form, and that's been proven. We can see that in the stats and the charts. So like you say, it's all about maintaining the form. We probably can't maintain the form what we're on at the minute. 6 wins on the bounce. We're not going to win every week, but if we can maintain the overall form of 2022, now this is that's a different story, and we probably would, scientifically, if you will, on average, the points in previous seasons would be enough to get 4th or 5th. Now, that's crazy to be so far ahead of kind of the schedule. I mean, I don't know what the 5-year plan is or, the finer details of the club, but to possibly be able to get Champions League football this season, like, wow, like that's crazy. But yeah, it's like, do you think that isn't, is that more achievable, maybe to get Europa League? And this is a kind of question that I was going to ask next, but if we didn't get any form of European football, would you, as a fan, be disappointed if we kind of dropped out of the top 7 and maybe finished 8th? I'll give you my views on it. I would be right now, as we kind of speak at this moment, I'd be very disappointed this season if we didn't get some form of, whether it was Europa Conference League, even just somewhere to kind of find our feet back in Europe after a few decades away. It would be great just to get any form of European football. I'd be very happy with Europa League, not so happy with Conference, although I would take it. And Champions League obviously would be a dream. I think back to the Champions League nights, like I was 15, 16 years old, watching the Juventus match and, the Feyenoord game and, chatting about it with people at school and the next day. And honestly, they were some of the best football days of my life, and the coverage was great. Everybody could watch it on ITV. It was it's a little bit different these days, with the rights and stuff. But everybody was watching the games at home, and you could talk about the next day. And it was crazy the fact that we needed to, we lost our first 3, and then we won our next 3, and we qualified for the next round. And it's magical. I would love those times again. But getting back to the question, do you think that's more achievable? Maybe a 5th place finish, or at very most a kind of 4th place finish?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why not. Like I touched on earlier on, Newcastle have gone against the top teams, the direct rivals for the Champions League place, and inside 15 games, that's the caveat, that have proven the better than those teams. And so why can't Newcastle get in the top 4 based on what we've seen this season? Like I say, the big thing is maintaining that form. But I agree. Before the season started, I predicted Newcastle would finish 8th. And if they were to finish there, based on what we've seen this season, I would be very disappointed. They've teased, at least in these 15 games, just how good they are. And if they weren't to even get European football, it would require quite a significant dip in form. So that, and with any dip in form comes that disappointment. You see how quickly football can change. We've won six wins in a row, and we're talking title race. If you lose your next 6, you're talking, we'll be lucky to get top half. Things like that. It can change very quickly. So I would be disappointed if Newcastle weren't able to get European football this season, because they have been that good so far.
Yeah.
I think Champions League would be massive. There's no reason why they can't do that based on what we've seen. But I still think you're looking, Liverpool will come back into it. Spurs, very good team. Not necessarily blown away by what I've seen from Chelsea or Manchester United this season. No reason why Newcastle can't finish above them. But yeah, you're looking Man City, Arsenal. Certainly, you'd expect to be the top two based on the 15 games, and then Liverpool, Spurs also will come into it as well. So yeah, if you can push them to the edge, to the final few games, and hopefully sneak in that top four, that's a great season from Newcastle. There's absolutely no question in that. And yeah, I think about the top seven as well. The Conference League, I wouldn't say is the worst thing for Newcastle. Obviously, you probably prefer Europa League. I just think if Newcastle win the Conference League, I'd probably back us to win it and get that sort of major trophy, if you like, in terms of the Conference League. So that would be the one bonus of that. I mean, some difficult away trips. I think my work car would be getting some miles on its expenses. But
I'd have to renew the passport. I with having a couple of kids, we haven't been away for a few years, and I just checked it there, and it's definitely expired. So I'm going to have to sort that out the next few months, hopefully. Get that renewed.
Like you say, there's some great away trips, particularly if you're in the Champions League, but obviously some lesser sort of towns, places, cities you wouldn't otherwise visit. So,
and it's even better if you're getting paid to do it, man. That's the dream. That's the dream. That's the dream job, man. So this is a little comment from Harry. He will get third in his opinion. We've proved we're better than Chelsea and Spurs. Liverpool also off it, and Man United. They're a mess. It's a difficult one, because I agree with Dom on this one, that Liverpool will probably come back. I mean, you just can't discredit Liverpool. They've had a tricky few months, but I do feel like they'll come back. Chelsea, they seem to be struggling under Potter, but Potter is a great manager. You know, I've seen the kind of, I was reading on Twitter today, there's been a few murmurs of discontent, and you're thinking, the guy's only been there a couple of months, and he is a good manager. Like, I'd be worried if, as a Chelsea fan, if they brought someone in who was unknown, who you kind of weren't sure whether they could actually get the best out of the squad. But Potter has done wonders at Brighton. In my opinion, Potter is up there with Howe as the best English manager at present. So I feel like, you can't write them off just yet. Do you think Chelsea will improve? Are you a fan of Potter, Dom? Do you think he's the man that could maybe take them forward?
I'm not sure. I can only base on what I've seen so far, and the results haven't came. And I thought his Chelsea side, arguably a slightly weakened Chelsea side, looked one of the worst Chelsea sides I've seen at St James's Park in a while. And Newcastle have had some good results against Chelsea over the years. I remember the 3-0, Jose Perez scoring 3-2, Musa Sissoko. And this Chelsea team, when it got announced, had no fear factor about it, if you like. But I do rate him. I did rate him at Brighton. I could see why he got the job, but he is susceptible to those runs of form. I think his incredible job at Brighton, you're looking last season, I think Brighton went on a spell losing 6 games in a row, yet still managed to finish as high as they did. So it just shows he is one of those streaky managers, if you like, who can go on runs, but always manages to bounce back and turn things around. And whether that's the right manager for Chelsea, I'm not sure, because they notoriously have had a quick trigger finger, particularly Roman Abramovich. But yeah, I think only time will tell. Based on what I'm seeing so far, I do have my doubts, though.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, man. It's like this is unprecedented for us as Newcastle fans, especially in the last 14, 15 years to be kind of having these conversations. And it is really weird that I was looking at the scores at the weekend, and I kind of, obviously as fans, we always look out for certain results that you want teams to stay beneath you. And like, I saw the Everton result, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm glad that Everton got beat. And then I'm thinking, why? Like, it's irrelevant to us now, if you understand what I mean. It's like these are the kind of teams that we were worried about, and luckily for us, like we're not having to worry anymore. I mean, I said last the kind of summer just gone after Everton survived with Lampard, I was very much kind of in the kind of mindset that Lampard wouldn't succeed. I think I've seen enough, and maybe the Everton fans have too, to know he's kind of not going to take them to the next level. But he did well last season to kind of keep them up, kind of just by the skin of the teeth, and they had a few results towards the end of the season. But ultimately, if you look at the form this season, they've just gone straight back, back to the kind of the form they were finishing off, before the end of last season. So, yeah, it's interesting. But I'm kind of deviating there. But my point is, it takes a while to change your mindset from looking at these teams, what you think are your rivals or you remember as being your rivals. And now we're looking at a complete different set of rivals. It takes some getting your head around, doesn't it? Do you agree on that one?
Absolutely. I mean, case in point, we were sat in the press box on Saturday, and Leeds were beating Spurs, and we're like, that's a bit annoying. And then we're like, no, that's a good result for Newcastle. And then obviously there was twists and turns in that game, and you end up going, Leeds.
That was the same.
Leeds end up getting beat, Spurs win, and then you're like, Newcastle have dropped to fourth temporarily, as it happened. But last season, that would have been a result Newcastle fans would have absolutely rejoiced over, and now it's almost like that's a bit annoying. So it shows it's just the way football works. You've got new rivals. It's just based on who's around you in the table, and at the moment, Newcastle are right near the top.
That's it. Football's such a fluid kind of business, if you will, isn't it? It's like there's always kind of things changing, and just like everything's constantly moving all the time. Like even like, we were talking about players that we'd leave out the squad, and a few years back, like we would never have kind of suggested they'd be kind of out the door. And the kind of what we're trying to say is everybody has their time, doesn't it? Whether it's like individual players, managers, or clubs themselves. If you look back at Man United's legacy, everything just goes round in a circle. You kind of get so many years as a player that, you've got the peak of your game. You get kind of a spell as a manager, which is becoming shorter by the kind of every year. And then like clubs themselves, they just go through cycles. Like obviously, we grew up with Arsenal, that were the invincible side, and they were kind of the team to beat. And then they dropped off massively for years. And now they're sitting top of the league, and you're thinking like, it just goes round, doesn't it? I guess that what I'm trying to say is that's just football in a nutshell. It's just constantly changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be, I was thinking about this, it'll be sad when this current crop of players, you like Kieran Trippier, who is 32 now, Dan Burns, obviously out of contract end of next season. Like, when do these players move on? Because they've played such an important role in such a small period of time. And it's just, football will always move, and you're just constantly fighting a battle to try and stay on top of it.
Yeah, I just want to touch on Trippier there. I know people say this about a lot of players, but I could honestly see him in a coaching role as Eddie's kind of, part of his staff. I don't know who he's, kind of if they've got space to kind of put him on, because he's got Tyndall as his number 2. But it would be great if Trippier stayed here for his, the entirety of the rest of his career, maybe 3 or 4 years, and kind of just dropped straight into a coaching role. That would be so good. I mean, Trippier does seem to be I don't want to say a late bloomer, because he's achieved a lot throughout his career, but he certainly seems to be aging like a fine wine, if that makes sense. I still think he's got a few years left in the tank. His positional sense is great. He's not too quick, but he's got a good engine on him. So he's I think he's got the ability to kind of prolong his career a bit. But when he does retire, I would love to see Trips up here in a coaching role. Do you think that could be a possibility?
I can't see why not. He's certainly, it's a bit early to tell, but he's been here best part of a year now, and by all accounts, very, very much enjoying his time up here. Moved his family up as well, so they're all settled, ideal. So yeah, if he can end his career at Newcastle and go into that coaching role, then fair play. That would be a sort of fitting sort of path for him to go on, because obviously the fans love him based on what he's done so far in what has been not too many games. But we're looking, well, you just put it on there, best right back in the world. That sounds ridiculous, and he does have some fair competition, but certainly in the Premier League, based on this season, best right back in the Premier League this season, and certainly in the conversation for best in the world. I'd say when he was signed, he was probably in the top 5, top 10, but his form certainly this season is probably put him. It's ridiculous as a Newcastle player, but you literally, this person in this position is one of the world's elite, and that's a great thing to be able to say. And Kieran Trippier, it's hard to fault him on off the pitch. When you speak to him after the game, he's probably the one player who, regardless of the result, fortunately most results are positive, but even when Newcastle got beat last season heavily at Man City and things like that, beat at Liverpool, Kieran Trippier, first player to talk. Yeah, he's taken on that captain's armband, even though he's not literally the captain. He's taken on that armband and that role and the responsibility brilliantly. So would have no qualms if he just were to end his career at Newcastle next 3-4 years and stay at the club in a sort of coaching role as well.
He just looks like such a top pro. It must be great, obviously kind of seeing him kind of week to week, and for you guys, like, to get the know him kind of off the pitch, and he just looks like such a top guy. Looks like somebody that you would want leading your team, and you kind of follow him to the ends of the earth, and just a great character to have. And I also feel like I could see this with Richie as well. He kind of gets forgotten about a lot, but Howe rates him so highly, obviously, from the time together at Bournemouth, and there's always been this rumor that Richie would move back down south. But he kind of never has. I often hear that he's been, so adamant to move back down south. And I'd heard on the grapevine that Bournemouth had kind of made a few approaches in previous seasons, but they never quite been able to, match his wages or whatever. And it was never quite the right deal. So I always felt like he could never be too fussed about moving back down, because obviously he must be fairly settled up here now. He's been up here, I guess would be 6 years or something like that now, 7 years. Maybe that's a bit too much. I'm not sure of the timelines, but obviously he'd be someone else that I think is, if he is settled up here, I mean, they'd be two excellent coaches, Trippier and Richie. That's if they couldn't get the best out of a squad on a training field, then who could? It's I would love to see those guys stick around. Yeah. So man. But so we're kind of drawn to a close, Don. But before we go, just want to ask you, on a personal level, how did you get affiliated with NUFC? What was your kind of? Did it get passed down from your father or your grandfather, or was it something completely different? And do you live local to the area? Are you a Tyne lad? Are you on the outskirts? What kind of vibe as a child got you into the Tyne in the first place?
Well, I haven't known anything else really. I mean, when you're born in the RVI, it's hard to escape Newcastle. So
that's great.
I've literally I can't remember a time when I wasn't supporting Newcastle United. So obviously all my family do. It's boring, fantastic. But it's just the way it is.
It's just obviously everybody's got a different story, and I'm from Durham, so I'm a Durham mag. So, and I was actually born at Bishop, so my friend always. He's always giving us a bit stick, calling us a smoggy. I mean, that's nowhere near Middlesbrough, but to him, it's he's just taking a mick. But I mean, I got it passed down to me through my granddad, who just loved football. My granddad used to play for Bishop Auckland, Towlaw, Crook Town, and a few. He was a nippy right winger, I believe. Tommy Robinson, shout out in the heavens. But he got me into it, and it's something that's just stuck with me since I was maybe about 10-year-old, and I kind of came from a single parent household where we didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't often get from Durham to Newcastle to go to games, but I was always cutting out the Northern Echo, kind of making little photo books and scrapbooks and things, and it was all down to him. He just kind of he got me into it as a kid, and it just stayed with me. But it's great that we've all had these individual journeys, and we've been through 14 years of hell with Ashley, and then from now, I always think it's just what's always stuck out to me is that most of us would have probably taken anybody as a new owner just to get rid of Ashley. But there's just such a kind of a juxtaposition between from where we were in our previous owner to probably getting the best owners in the world. I mean, that's a pretty big jump, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I just don't know. I just feel like we're so lucky to be having this. And are you feeling the same? It just seems like everything's on a high. Do you feel lucky as a fan at the minute to be in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an absolute privilege to be going to games and thinking Newcastle should or could win almost every week, which is a great feeling. But I think it also shows the last 12 months just how naive Mike Ashley was owning Newcastle. Like, he didn't realise what he had. Like, a lot of money has been invested in Newcastle, don't get me wrong, but it just shows if you just tweak a few things, if you just put in the right amount of money at the right time, just what can happen. And it's been no rocket science. It's taken no massive change. It's just appointing the right manager, bringing in 4 or 5 solid, good players who can help take you to the next level. And then in no time, I don't think anyone expected how quickly it would happen, but it just shows. And St James's Park at the moment is, I said on Saturday, I know I'm biased, but it must be the best place to watch football in the country at the moment. I mean, I think Newcastle are the best.
It was crazy on Saturday. Like, literally, I was like out my seat more times than I was in my seat. I was sitting on the edge, kind of, so I could get like out the seat. I was on like this kind of stairwell on the steps in the lasers, and I just kept jumping out my seat. And I'm thinking, like, this is mental. Like, I can't remember the last time I was so like, this is the stuff that football should be, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and St James's Park. I mean, from the first day, or the first game, the takeover, even though Steve Bruce was still in charge, and that was a little bit of a dark cloud. But when Jimmy Nail, Big River played over the PA, it was hard not to get a lump in your throat. And that Callum Wilson scoring early on, the atmosphere there, you just sense the change. And War Flags have obviously had a massive impact in that as well. Yeah. But since then, like you say, it's been a snowball effect, and the results have obviously followed. And Newcastle's form in 2022 has just been remarkable at St James's Park. I think the Cambridge result, which we'll forget about, just the one defeat against Liverpool, I think that no team has lost fewer games than Newcastle in the Premier League this year. So, and I think it's something like 10 goals conceded, which is ridiculous at St James's Park. Ridiculously good run of form in terms of the opposition scoring as well. The opposition fans have had very little to cheer about, almost as much as Newcastle fans have had something to cheer about, which is brilliant.
Yeah. The thing that's really bugging me then, you just touched on it, was, this would be a 15-game unbeaten spell if it wasn't for that Liverpool game. Crazy. Isak's goal was online. It was onside. And, obviously we got the defeat in the 97th minute or 98th minute, whatever it was. And you're just thinking, like, that is crazy, because if that hadn't happened and we drew 1-1, held out for a few more seconds, we would be unbeaten because of the World Cup, obviously, but we'd be unbeaten up to Boxing Day, which is like, that would have been one of the most amazing things to, like, just say as a Newcastle fan after the years of crap what we've been through, like, to be going 15 games unbeaten and still unbeaten at Boxing Day. But I mean, it's still an achievement as it is. It's fantastic. 1 defeat all season, but just incredible, man. But well, Dom, listen, thanks very much, man. We'll wrap things up there, but it's been great to have you on. Thoroughly enjoyed this chat, man. This is what it's all about. This is like, on the show, we try to get, different faces on, and like I say, fans, journalists, and other kind of NUFC personalities. And it's great just to get a different aspect of kind of what people's thoughts and feelings are. It just feels like a huge, big community, like, spirit at the minute. We're all just kind of getting on so well, and it's great, these interactions. I really do love them. So I appreciate you so much for coming on. Hope everybody at home has enjoyed the show. We'll be putting it up on YouTube. If you haven't seen it live, you can go back and watch it. So, Dom, thanks very much. Wish you all the best with the Shields Gazette and the Mouth of the Tyne podcast. Namesake, no relation to us, different names, but it is a coincidence, I promise. So listen, nice to meet you, speak to you, my friend, and
cheers,
hope to keep in touch. And listen, thanks a lot, guys, everybody at home, for listening and watching. Please like the video if you appreciate the content, and subscribe to the channel and help us grow. This is what Mouth of the Tyne's all about. Just trying to create a channel where we can get fans, journalists on, and other NUFC personalities, and just kind of talk NUFC. So thanks very much, guys. I've been Ben from Mouth of the Tyne. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All the best.